Okay, so imagine this for a second. You're sitting in a conference room, one of those all-glass fish bowls, high up in a skyscraper. You're in your best suit, or maybe your best hoodie, depending on where you are.
Right.
And you are just sweating. It's a big job interview.
The high-stakes moment. Yeah, we've all been there.
Totally. And you've done your homework. You have your resume memorized, down to the last bullet point. You've got that witty answer ready for what's your greatest weakness.
Oh, classic. I just work too hard.
Exactly. I just care too much. You are ready. But then the interviewer, he leans across the table, doesn't even glance at your resume. He just looks you dead in the eye.
Yeah.
And he asks you a question that it stops you cold.
Okay.
He asks, what important truth do very few people agree with you on?
Oof. Yeah, that'll do it. Silence in the room.
It's just a brutal question.
It really is. I mean, on the surface, it sounds like a parlor trick, right? Like some fun little icebreaker. But if you actually try to answer it, honestly answer it,
No.
it is just intellectually exhausting.
I was trying to answer it myself, just prepping for this deep dive, and my brain immediately goes to all the wrong places. I'm thinking, okay, I think pineapple belongs on pizza.
Right, which isn't a truth. That's just, a preference. A bad one, but a preference.
A very bad one, fair enough. Or I might say something like, the U.S. education system is broken.
But who disagrees with you on that?
Nobody. Everyone agrees with that.
And that's the trap. That is the entire trap of the question. And it's the opening salvo of the book we're covering today. We are doing a deep dive into 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel.
Right.
And Thiel argues that if you answer that question with something like, there is no God, or America is exceptional, you're not actually being a contrarian. You're just taking a side in a fight that everyone is already having.
You're just picking a team.
Yeah.
You're not stating a new truth.
Precisely. Thiel says a good answer has a very specific form. Most people believe X, but the truth is the opposite of X. And being able to get to that answer, that's the prerequisite for building the future. It's not just a clever interview question. It's a test of whether you can actually see things that other people are blind to.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are unpacking a book that has, it's basically become a Bible in Silicon Valley. But to call it just a business book really feels like it's selling it short.
Oh, yeah. It's a philosophy book that's kind of disguised as startup advice.
Exactly. We're talking about 0 to 1, notes on startups, or how to build a future.
It's a manifesto, really.
Yeah.
It goes after all the dogmas that have dominated the tech world, especially since the dot-com crash. It challenges how we think about competition, progress, even, how we plan our own lives.
So here's our mission for the next hour or so. We are going to dissect Peter Thiel's worldview. And I want to set the tone right at the top here. Peter Thiel is, he's a polarizing figure.
To put it mildly.
He's a contrarian billionaire, a libertarian, a venture capitalist. He founded PayPal and Palantir. We are not here to endorse his politics or every single one of his takes. But for this hour, we are going to treat 0 to 1 as our primary source. We want to really understand the argument on its own terms.
And the core argument is right there in the title, 0 to 1. It's about, I guess you could call it the geometry of progress.
Okay, so let's break that down. He kicks things off by drawing this really clear distinction between two types of progress, vertical and horizontal.
Right, so picture a graph in your head. On the horizontal axis, you have progress that goes from 1 to n.
1 to n. So I have one of something, and I just make a whole bunch more of them.
Exactly. This is just copying things that work. It's taking something that already exists, let's use as example a typewriter, and you build 100 more typewriters. You haven't invented anything new, you're just scaling up something old. And Thiel's keyword for this is globalization.
Globalization. That's an interesting word for it, because usually we hear that and we think of, trade deals and shipping containers. But he's using it to mean something more like standardization.
Yeah, he means taking things that work in one place, say the developed world, and just making them work everywhere. China is his perfect example of this. If you look at China's plan for the last, 20, 30 years, it has basically been to copy what worked in the West.
Right.
19th century railroads, 20th century air conditioning, entire cities built from scratch. They might skip a step here and there, like going straight to mobile instead of landlines, but they're fundamentally following a roadmap someone else already drew.
Which, it's a smart strategy in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's way easier to copy a model than it is to invent a new one. Much lower risk.
It is lower risk, sure. But then you have the other axis, the vertical one. This is going from 0 to 1.
The title of the book.
This is doing something new. So if you have a typewriter and you build a word processor, that's vertical progress. You haven't just made more typewriters. You've created a whole new paradigm. And the single word Thiel uses for this is technology.
And it's really important to clarify, he doesn't just mean IT, right? Because we all have this habit of hearing the word technology, and we just immediately think of iPhones or, Silicon Valley.
No, and that's a huge misconception he's trying to fight. I mean, we've basically equated tech with computers for so long that we forget the real meaning. Technology, in Thiel's framework, is any new and better way of doing things. It's a miracle. It's doing more with less.
A miracle.
Yeah. If you invent a new way to cure a disease, that's technology. If you invent a new way to organize a school that teaches kids twice as effectively, that is technology.
I love that framing, that it's a miracle. It gives it this almost religious weight. But there's a darker side to this whole distinction he's making, especially when you think about the future of the planet. Because normally, we think globalization is great. Lift everyone out of poverty, everyone gets a fridge, everyone gets a car. That's the humanitarian goal. But Thiel just says, hold on a second.
He slams on the brakes here. And this is where the argument gets really, really high stakes. He argues that globalization without new technology is just completely unsustainable.
Walk me through that thinking.
Okay, so let's just look at the simple math. If a country like China doubles its energy production over the next 20 years to match the West, but they do it using today's tools, coal, oil, natural gas, what happens?
You get double the air pollution. You get smog you can practically chew on.
You get an environmental catastrophe. I mean, if every single household in India were to start living like the average American household does today, but using only current technology, the planet physically cannot support it. We'd run out of resources. We would literally choke on the fumes.
So just spreading the American dream or the Western standard of living to the whole world with the tech we have now is basically a suicide pact.
That is exactly the argument. Globalization diffuses wealth, it spreads it out. But only technology actually creates new wealth. So we need miracles. We need new technologies that let us generate energy without pollution, that let us feed billions without destroying the environment. So going from 0 to 1 isn't just, a cool business strategy to get rich. In Thiel's view, it's a moral necessity. It's about the survival of the species.
Wow. That really raises the stakes quite a bit.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about building a fun little app. We're talking about avoiding a global collapse. So, okay, if we need these miracles, where do they come from?
They come from startups.
But why startups? I mean, why can't the government do it? The government put a man on the moon.
Right.
Why can't a company like Google or Microsoft do it? They have billions of dollars, armies of brilliant engineers.
It's a problem of incentives and bureaucracy. I mean, big organizations just move slowly. They're fundamentally risk-averse. If you're a middle manager at some huge corporation, you don't get a promotion for taking a massive, crazy risk on a new idea that might fail.
No, you get promoted for not screwing up.
Exactly. You protect your downside, you play politics, and on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the lone genius, the mad scientist in the garage. They can create a great piece of art, maybe a cool prototype, but they can't build an entire industry by themselves.
You can't scale it.
Right. So a startup sits in this perfect sweet spot, and Thiel has this very specific definition for it. He says, a startup is the largest group of people you can convince of a plan to build a different future.
I really like that definition. It's not, a new business designed for rapid growth. It's a group of people convinced of a plan. It has this feeling of a secret mission.
It implies a conspiracy.
Benevolent conspiracy.
Hopefully. But yes, it's a group of people who see a truth that other people don't. And that mission, that brings us to maybe the most controversial part of his whole business philosophy. This is the part that usually makes Econ 101 professors just, spit out their coffee.
Yeah. I remember reading this section for the first time and having to read it again because it just felt so wrong. If you go to business school or you take any basic economics class, what's the first thing they teach you is the ideal state of any market.
Perfect competition. Adam Smith's invisible hand.
Right. Competition is good. It keeps prices low. It drives innovation. It's the bedrock of American capitalism.
And Thiel just comes out and says, competition is for losers.
Competition is for losers. I mean, that is just such a shocking thing to hear from a capitalist, venture capitalist. It feels un-American.
It does, but if you actually look at the math behind it, he argues it's just plain true. In a state of what economists call perfect competition, no company makes any real economic profit in the long run.
Okay, break that down for us. Why no profit?
So imagine you open a pizza shop. It's a great pizza shop. You're making good money. What's the first thing that happens?
Someone sees me making money, and they open their own pizza shop right across the street.
Right. And to steal your customers, maybe they cut their price by $1. So you have
Yeah.
to cut your price by $1. Then they start offering free delivery. So now you have to offer free delivery.
It's a race to the bottom.
It's a war of attrition. And
Wow.
eventually, your profit margins, the difference between what it costs you to make the pizza and what you sell it for, they get razor thin. You're
Yeah.
just fighting to survive every single day. You can't afford to pay your employees well. You can't invest in R&D to invent some revolutionary new pizza oven. You're just constantly stressed.
He uses a really grim example in the book to illustrate this. The Michelin star chef.
Bernard Luzo. Yeah, it's a tragic story. I mean, this guy was one of the most famous chefs in French history. He had 3 Michelin stars, which is the absolute pinnacle of that world. But the competition in high-end dining is it's brutal. You are only as good as your last meal.
And the margins are tiny?
Incredibly tight. Loiseau was quoted saying, "If I lose a star, I will commit suicide." That's how deeply his identity and his survival were tied to this competitive ranking. And in 2003, there were rumors a competing guide downgraded him. And just the sheer pressure of trying to maintain that level of perfection in such a competitive market, it just broke him. He killed himself.
That's the ultimate cost of perfect competition.
Right.
It drives people to ruthlessness, or in his case, to despair.
It turns business into a battle for sheer survival. Thiel's point is that we've romanticized competition because it feels fair, but in reality, it's often incredibly destructive. So if competition is for losers, what's the winner's game?
Monopoly.
Monopoly.
Which is such a dirty word.
Yeah.
I mean, we have antitrust laws specifically to break up monopolies. We think of the guy on the board game with the top hat and the monocle, or we think of Standard Oil just crushing everyone.
Right, or companies gouging prices just because they can. But Thiel wants us to completely redefine how we think about the word. He's not talking about illegal bullies or, government cronies who get some exclusive license. He's talking about a creative monopoly.
Creative monopoly. Okay, define that.
It's a company that is so good at what it does that no other company can even offer a close substitute.
Like Google and search.
Exactly like Google. Google isn't a monopoly because the government passed a law saying only Google can make a search engine. They're a monopoly because their product is just 10 times better than Bing or DuckDuckGo or anything else. They won by being superior.
And Thiel's argument is that this state, having a monopoly, is actually the only time a business can afford to be truly good.
That's it. It's only when you escape the daily, brutal struggle for survival. Because you have high profit margins, you can actually afford to think about ethics. You can pay your employees incredible salaries and benefits. You can plan for the next decade, not just the next payroll. You can start a moonshot factory to try and cure aging.
That's a fascinating inversion.
Yeah.
They usually think monopolies are evil and competitive companies are, honest small businesses.
Yeah.
But he's saying if you are fighting for every single penny, you almost have to be a little bit evil just to keep the lights on.
You have to cut corners. You have to squeeze your suppliers.
Yeah. Google's old motto, "Don't be evil," is a luxury that only a monopoly can truly afford.
It's a luxury that comes from abundance. If you're drowning, you can't save anyone else. Monopolies are not drowning.
This brings us to one of my favorite parts of the book, what he calls the lies people tell.
The distorting lens.
Yes. Thiel argues that because we have this very simple moral view, competition is good, monopoly is bad, everybody lies about what state they're actually in.
They lie to fit the accepted narrative.
So let's start with the monopolist. The monopolist lies to pretend they're actually small and struggling.
Exactly. I mean, if you're a real monopoly, the last thing you want is the government paying attention to you. You don't want the Department of Justice sniffing around. So you pretend to be in a massively competitive market.
So how does a company like Google do this?
Think about how they describe themselves. In search, Google owns something like 68% of the market, at least when the book was written. That is a monopoly by any definition. But they don't go around saying, we are a search monopoly. They say, we are a technology company in the global advertising market.
Ah, I see what they're doing. So instead of being this huge fish in the little search pond, they frame themselves as a tiny little fish in the massive global advertising ocean.
Right. We compete with TV ads and billboards and newspapers, or they'll say they're in the consumer tech market. They'll throw in mobile phones and wearables and self-driving cars. If you define your market as a union of all these gigantic markets, you look like a tiny player with less than a couple percent of market share. Don't regulate us. We're just another scrappy competitor.
That's brilliant. It's basically mathematical camouflage.
It really is.
Okay, but then you have the non-monopolists, the people who actually are in a hyper-competitive market, and they tell the exact opposite lie.
The competitors lie. They have to pretend to be completely unique just to justify their existence. They need to convince their investors and probably themselves that they secretly have a monopoly.
What's the example he uses for this?
The restaurant example is perfect. So imagine you want to open a new restaurant in Palo Alto that serves, I don't know, authentic British food.
Which is already a very risky business proposition.
That's fair point. But when you go to pitch your investors, you say, we are the only British food restaurant in Palo Alto. We have a monopoly.
We own 100% of the market.
We are the undisputed market leader in British food within this specific zip code. But that's a total lie. Because the reality is, when a customer in Palo Alto gets hungry, they aren't just choosing between different British food options.
No, of course not. They're choosing between your restaurant, the Thai place next door, the burger joint down the street, or just driving 5 minutes to Mountain View.
Precisely. The restaurant defines its market as the intersection of these tiny markets. British food, a Palo Alto. They shrink the definition down until they're the only one left in the box. But the real market is all restaurants in the Bay Area. And in that market, they are just drowning in competition.
That is such a crucial mental model for anyone in business. The monopolist tells a story about a huge market to hide their dominance. The competitor tells a story about a tiny, niche market to hide their irrelevance.
It's harsh, but it's true. And the big takeaway for you listening is this. Don't fool yourself. If you're starting a business, are you actually doing something unique, or are you just defining the category so narrowly that it only looks unique on paper?
Okay, so we've established we want to build a monopoly. We want to go from 0 to 1. But building these kinds of companies requires capital. It needs money. And this leads us right into the physics of venture capital and this concept he calls the power law.
The power law. Yeah, this concept is it's central to Thiel's entire worldview. Once you see it, you start seeing it everywhere. It applies to investing, but he argues it also applies to your career, to your life.
So let's start with the investing side. Most of us, we're taught a very specific rule about money, which is diversify.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right. Buy an index fund, buy the S&P 500, you spread your risk. So if one company fails, the others will balance it out.
That's the conventional wisdom. And for the public stock market, it's generally pretty good advice. But in the world of startups, the world of 0 to 1 Thiel says this is just dead wrong. Because startups don't follow a normal distribution.
A bell curve.
Right. In a bell curve, most outcomes are average. You have some really tall people, some really short people, but most people are clustered right around the average height. You don't have anyone who is 10 miles tall. But in the world of venture capital, you do have companies that are 10 miles tall. This is the power law. It's the Pareto principle on steroids. In VC, the returns are wildly, wildly skewed. A tiny handful of companies will radically outperform all the others combined.
He shares some of the data from his own VC firm, Founders Fund, in the book.
And it is staggering. They looked back at their 2005 fund. Their single best investment in that fund, which was Facebook, returned more money than all of their other investments put together. The second best investment, Palantir, returned more than everything else combined if you exclude Facebook.
So it's not like the best company does, 10% better than the second best?
No. The difference is exponential. The gap between company number 1 and company number 2 is massive. And the difference between number 1 and number 100 is basically infinite because company number 100 is probably worth 0.
Which means the spray and pray approach, investing in 100 companies and just hoping a few of them do okay, is a mathematical mistake.
It's a recipe for disaster. Because if you invest in 100 pretty good companies, but you miss the one great one, the one Facebook, you lose money. The rule for venture capital becomes, you should only invest in companies that have the potential to return the value of your entire fund.
So if a company looks like a safe bet that might, triple your money, you shouldn't invest.
You should pass immediately because a 3x return doesn't move the needle in a power law world. You need the 1,000x return to make up for all the failures.
Now, this is where it gets really uncomfortable for the listener, even if you're not a venture capitalist.
Yeah.
Because Thiel takes this math, this power law distribution, and he applies it to us. to our lives and our careers.
This is his "you are not a lottery ticket" argument.
I have to admit, I felt very called out by this section.
I think most of us do, because most of us treat our careers like a diversified portfolio. We try to be well-rounded.
Keeping my options open. I mean, that was the motto of my entire generation. Go to law school just in case. Get an MBA just in case. Learn a little bit of coding just in case.
We hedge. We treat the future like a lottery. We buy a bunch of different tickets, a little bit of law, a little bit of finance, a little bit of tech, and we just hope that one of them hits the jackpot.
And Thiel says.
He says, you are betting against the power law. You cannot diversify your life. You only get one. You can't run a dozen different careers in parallel and hope one of them takes off.
You can't be a lawyer and a doctor and a startup founder all at the same time.
Exactly. And because the differences in value between companies are so extreme, it matters immensely which path you choose. It's not about being the best person at a mediocre company. It's about being at the right company.
The quote that really hit me was, differences between companies dwarf differences in roles within companies.
Let's make that concrete. Imagine it's 2005. You have two job offers. You could be the CEO of a mid-sized paper company, or you could be the 20th engineer hired at Google.
The CEO title sounds way more prestigious.
But that 20th engineer at Google is now worth tens of millions of dollars. The CEO of the paper company probably worked harder, had more stress, and made a tiny fraction of that.
Owning 0.01% of Google is worth so much more than owning 100% of a failing or stagnant business.
Infinitely more. So the advice is, you have to abandon the lottery ticket mindset. Don't just hope for the best. You have to design your future. Find the one company that is going from 0 to 1 and get on that rocket ship or build it yourself. But don't head, focus.
This whole idea of designing your future is a perfect transition to the real philosophical core of the book. Because if we accept that we need to have a plan, we first have to believe that planning actually works. And Thiel argues that as a culture, we've kind of stopped believing in plans.
He introduces this 2x2 matrix here that I have to say it completely changed how I look at recent history.
The future matrix.
It's a brilliant framework. He divides our collective view of the future into 4 quadrants based on 2 simple questions. Question 1, do you think the future will be better or worse than the present? That's your optimism versus pessimism axis.
Okay.
And question 2, do you have a specific plan to make it that way, or do you just sort of think it'll happen on its own? That's your definite versus indefinite axis.
Okay, so let's walk through the 4 quadrants. Let's start with the one that feels, well, very familiar if you watch the news. Indefinite pessimism.
This is the view that the future will probably be bleak, but we don't know exactly how or when. It's just this general feeling of slow decline.
And he points to modern Europe as the prime example of this.
Right, present-day Europe. The general mood is, our best days are behind us, the welfare state is crumbling, the economy is stagnant. But nobody knows exactly when the real crash is coming.
So how do you act if you're an indefinite pessimist? What's your strategy?
You basically react with hedonism. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die. You have what he calls vacation mania. You don't start a new business, you don't raise a big family, you just try to enjoy the present moment before the lights finally go out.
That's pretty grim. Okay, what's the next quadrant? Definite pessimism.
He says this is modern China.
China is pessimistic. That's surprising. They seem to be growing so incredibly fast.
But look at why they're growing. They're growing out of fear. They believe the future will be bleak resource scarcity, environmental collapse, maybe a conflict with the West. They are definitely pessimistic. They know for a fact that winter is coming.
So they prepare for it.
They plan for it meticulously. They save everything. They copy the West as fast as they possibly can to secure their position before the resources run out. It's not a happy, optimistic growth. It's a desperate, survival-based growth.
Okay, so let's move over to the optimism side of the matrix. This is where the U.S. falls. But there's a really important split here.
Right. Thiel argues that the U.S. used to be in the definite optimism quadrant. This was the America of the 1950s and 60s, the Jetsons era.
We believed the future would be better, and we had a specific blueprint for how to get there.
Exactly. We had the Apollo program. Kennedy said, in this decade, we will put a man on the moon. And we did it. We built the interstate highway system. We built the Panama Canal. Engineers were heroes. We drew up blueprints, and we made them reality. We literally reshaped the physical world according to a plan.
But then, something changed.
Around 1982, he notes, which is maybe not coincidentally, when the stock market started its massive 40-year bull run, we shifted into indefinite optimism.
The future will be better. We just have no idea how.
Don't worry, technology will save us somehow. The market will figure it out. A rising tide lifts all boats. We stopped making grand plans. We started hedging our bets.
And this is the era of finance?
Finance, law, and consultancy. I mean, think about it. In an indefinite world, you don't build new things. You just rearrange existing things. You shuffle money around. You look for inefficiencies to exploit. You maximize what they call optionality. The smart of kids used to go into physics and engineering. Now they go to Goldman Sachs or McKinsey.
This is really a direct critique of the whole lean startup methodology too, isn't it?
Oh, it is a savage critique of it. The whole lean startup philosophy is, don't make a big plan. Plans are useless. Just build a minimum viable product or an MVP, throw it out there, and iterate.
A/B test your way to success.
And Thiel absolutely hates this. He argues that leanness is just a methodology for people who have no idea what to build. He says, iteration without a bold plan won't take you from 0 to 1. If you're just A/B testing button colors, you might find a local maximum.
You'll make a slightly better app for ordering toilet paper online.
Exactly. You're just polishing a pebble. But you don't accidentally A/B test your way to inventing the iPhone. You don't iterate your way to a reusable rocket. You need a vision. You need a plan.
It's the difference he draws between Darwinian evolution and intelligent design.
Yes. Evolution is just random mutation and iteration over millions and millions of years. It works, but it takes forever. In business, you don't have millions of years. You need intelligent design. You need a founder with a plan.
So the big call to action here, both politically and personally, is for a return to definite optimism. We need to stop treating the future as this vague, hazy thing that just happens to us and start building it with intention.
We need to reclaim our agency.
Okay, so let's say I'm sold. I want to be a definite optimist. I want to build a creative monopoly. I want to find that power law opportunity. How do I actually do it? Thiel gives us some very specific tactics.
Yeah, he breaks down the key characteristics of a monopoly into 4 main categories. If you're building a company, he says you really need to check these boxes.
Okay, what's the first characteristic? Proprietary technology.
This is the hard part. Your technology can't just be a little bit better. It needs to be 10x better than the closest substitute.
10 times better, not just like 10% better.
A 10% improvement is just an incremental tweak. Nobody's going to switch for that. Switching products is a pain. But to get me to completely change my behavior, you need to absolutely blow me away.
Give me an example of a real 10x improvement.
PayPal versus mailing a paper check. I mean, think about buying something on eBay back in 1999. You had to go to the post office, buy a money order, mail it, wait 5 days for it to arrive, wait for the check to clear. It could take 10 days.
Right.
PayPal was instant. That's not 10% better. That is orders of magnitude better. It's 10x.
Or Amazon versus a physical bookstore.
They had 10x the inventory. If your local Barnes & Noble has 100,000 books, Amazon had 1 million. It was a categorically different experience.
Okay, so 10x tech. What's the second characteristic? Network effects.
This is when a product gets more valuable as more people use it. Facebook is the classic example. If I'm the only person on Facebook, it's completely useless.
Yeah.
If all my friends and family are on it, it's essential to my social life.
But there's a trap here, right? A kind of paradox.
It's a huge paradox. The paradox of the start. Every founder wants to start by going after a total addressable market of billions of people. You hear the pitch all the time. If we can just get 1% of the Chinese market.
Thiel says that's exactly the wrong way to do it. You have to start small.
Extremely small. If you try to get 1% of the global population, you'll fail. You'll just be a tiny drop in a vast ocean. Facebook didn't start by targeting everyone on Earth. It started with just Harvard, not even all colleges, just Harvard undergrads.
A tiny, tiny market.
They completely dominated. They got something like 60% of Harvard signed up in a month. Then they expanded to other Ivy League schools, then all colleges, then eventually everyone. You have to dominate a niche first, be a big fish in a small pond, and then slowly expand the size of the pond.
Okay, third characteristic.
Economies of scale. This is where software businesses have a huge advantage. The cost of producing one more copy of your software is basically 0.
Your marginal cost is 0.
Right. If you own a yoga studio and you want to double your number of customers, you have to rent twice the space, hire twice the instructors. Your costs scale up with your revenue. If you're Microsoft and you sell another copy of Windows, it costs you nothing. So as you get bigger, your business actually gets stronger and more profitable.
And the final one.
Branding. Apple is the gold standard here, obviously. But Thiel gives a really important warning. Brand cannot exist without substance. You can't just polish a turd. The 10x technology has to be there first. Yahoo tried to rebrand itself as cool and hip in the 2010s, but the underlying product was still a mess. It didn't work.
Now, in order to find an idea that can fit all these characteristics, Thiel talks about something he calls secrets. And this is where the book gets very distinctive. He compares two types of people, the Unabomber and the hipster.
It's a provocative comparison, for sure, but if you stick with it, it really explains why he thinks innovation has stalled in so many areas.
But why the Unabomber?
Ted Kaczynski, I mean, he was a murderer, obviously, but he wrote this whole manifesto, and in it, he argued that modern society has already solved all the easy and meaningful problems.
The power process, he called it.
Exactly. He said that in the past, you had to hunt for your own food. It was hard, but it was fulfilling. Now, everything is just provided for you. There's nothing important left to do but, trivial hobbies. So his solution was to destroy technology to force us back to that meaningful struggle.
Okay, and how does the hipster fit into this?
The hipster, ironically, believes the exact same thing. The hipster believes there is nothing new left to discover. Everything has been done. So what do? They retreat into retro irony. They listen to vinyl records, they grow a handlebar mustache, they become an artisanal barista. Because the idea of real achievement is seen as passé or impossible.
So the Unabomber becomes a terrorist, and the hipster becomes a nihilist.
Right.
But they both start from the same premise. There are no secrets left.
Exactly. And Thiel says we have to reject this premise entirely. We have to believe in secrets. We have to believe that there are still huge, important truths about the world that nobody knows yet.
And he breaks secrets down into two types, right?
Yeah. Natural secrets and human secrets. Natural secrets are the undiscovered laws of physics or biology. Finding a cure for cancer is a natural secret. The key is out there. We just haven't found it yet.
And human secrets.
These are the really juicy ones. These are things people don't know about themselves or things they collectively agree to hide from themselves. The question to ask is, what is taboo?
What are people not allowed to talk about?
Precisely. Sometimes the greatest business idea is hidden behind a powerful social convention. Airbnb was a human secret. The convention was, you don't let strangers sleep in your house. That's crazy. That's dangerous.
But the secret was?
The secret was, actually, a lot of people would love to do that for extra money, and a lot of travelers would prefer a local experience to a sterile hotel. The founders saw a human truth that everyone else was ignoring because it just felt weird.
So to find a great startup idea, don't look at what's popular on the stock market. Look for the things that people aren't saying.
Look for the empty spaces on the map.
Okay, so we find a secret. We build a plan. We start a company. But you can't do it alone. You need a team. And Thiel has this very specific, very intense view on company culture. He calls it the mafia.
The PayPal Mafia. That's the famous nickname for the alumni of early PayPal. Thiel, Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, all those guys. They went on to found Tesla, LinkedIn, YouTube. Yep.
It's an absolutely incredible list. So how did they build that kind of culture?
Thiel says you can't just hire employees. You can't hire people who are just looking for a 9-to-5 and a paycheck. He says you need to build a culture so tight-knit that it actually looks like a cult to outsiders.
A startup messed up at its foundation cannot be fixed. That's Thiel's law.
The founding moments are singular. You need total alignment. He says you need people who are different, but all in the same way. The early PayPal team was, well, they were eccentric. He mentions that 4 of them had built bombs in high school. Yes. They were outsiders. They weren't the popular kids or the polished MBA types. They were a specific group of people who shared a specific vision and a specific obsession. If you just hire people who want a job, you get a bureaucracy. If you hire people who want to join a revolution, you get a startup.
It sounds incredibly intense. But I guess that's the whole point. Going from 0 to 1 is not supposed to be comfortable.
It never is.
All right, so we had the product, we had the secret, we have the team. Now we have to actually sell the thing. And this brings us to another huge blind spot that Thiel identifies in Silicon Valley.
Sales.
Oh, this is a big one. Engineers especially love to believe in the field of dreams fallacy. If you build it, they will come.
My product is so good it just sells itself.
Thiel says that is always a lie. If anyone ever says that, they are lying to themselves or they're lying to you. Sales is a hidden bottleneck, and engineers tend to underestimate it because good salesmanship is invisible.
Explain that. What do you mean by invisible sales? Well, think about it. If a salesperson looks like they're selling you something, if they're too slick, if they're pushy, they're a bad salesperson, your guard immediately goes up.
Right. I hate being sold to.
But great sales feels like a conversation. It feels like consulting. It feels like education. When you go to the Apple store and buy an iPhone, you don't feel like the person at the Genius Bar sold you anything. You feel like you chose it. But that entire experience was meticulously engineered. And because it looks so effortless, engineers think it's easy or, unnecessary, but you absolutely need a distribution strategy.
And this ties directly into his analysis of the failure of the clean tech bubble back in the 2000s. Do you remember Solyndra and all those solar companies?
Vaguely, a lot of money went in, and most of them just crashed and burned.
Investors poured something like $50 billion into clean tech, and almost all of it just evaporated. Why?
Thiel argues they ignored both the monopoly question and the sales question.
They were all chasing the trillion-dollar market.
Exactly. They all said, energy is a huge market. If we can just get 0.01% of the solar market, we'll be rich. But what that really meant was they were voluntarily entering a brutal, ruthless war. They were competing with super cheap Chinese solar panels on one side and entrenched government utilities on the other.
They were competing in a commodity market from day one.
And they didn't have a 10x technology improvement. A new solar panel that's 10% more efficient but costs twice as much isn't a monopoly product. It's a tiny niche product at best.
And they were relying on government subsidies instead of actual miracles.
Right. They were chasing horizontal progress, just making more solar panels, instead of vertical progress, which would have been inventing a completely new way to generate clean energy.
Speaking of new ways of doing things, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Robots, AI automation. Thiel wrote this book back in 2014, but it feels like he was predicting the exact anxiety that we're all feeling today about AI taking our jobs.
It's kind of eerie, isn't it? But his take on it is surprisingly optimistic, or at least very contrarian. He argues against the common fear that the robots will replace us. And he goes back to his distinction between globalization and technology to explain why.
Break that down.
Globalization, he says, is about substitution. If I can hire a worker in a developing country to do the exact same job for less money, that is substitution. People are competing with other people for the same resources. It's a zero-sum game.
But technology is about complementarity.
Right. Computers are tools. They are fundamentally different from human beings. Humans have intentionality. We make plans. We have desires. Computers are just amazing at processing data. They don't demand food. They don't want a bigger house. They don't have status anxiety. They just crunch numbers.
So the ideal business combines the strengths of both.
Palantir, his other big company, is the prime example of this. The model isn't AI replaces the human intelligence analyst. It's AI sifts through 1 billion data points so that the human analyst can spot the one clue that uncovers the terrorist plot. Human plus machine is far stronger than human alone, and it's far stronger than machine alone.
So don't fear the robot. Use the robot.
Precisely. Be the master of the tool, not the victim of substitution.
We have covered a massive amount of ground here. I mean, from the nature of progress itself, to the math of venture capital, to the philosophy of optimism. As we start to wrap up, I want to look at the very end of the book. Thiel presents us with a stark choice.
Stagnation or singularity?
It sounds like the title of a sci-fi movie.
It does, but it's the logical conclusion of his entire argument.
Yeah.
He looks at the long arc of history. We can't just assume things will stay stable forever. He says we really only have 4 possible options for the future of humanity.
Okay, let's hear them.
Option 1, recurrent collapse. We just fall back into a dark age, civilization falls apart, we start over.
Hard pass.
Option 2, plateau. The world just kind of stays like this forever. Stagnation, we just keep copying the same things over and over again.
But he argues that's actually impossible in the long run.
Right, because of resource limits and environmental pressures. If we just plateau, we eventually end up fighting over the scraps, which leads to option 3, extinction. We destroy ourselves with our own advanced weapons, fighting over those limited resources.
Also a pass.
Which leaves only option 4, singularity. We create radically new technologies that allow us to transcend our current limits. We go to the stars, we cure aging, we solve the energy crisis, we go from 0 to 1, but on a planetary scale.
So the only moral path and the only real survival path is the singularity. We have to choose to be definite optimists. We have to choose to create the future we want.
That is the core message of the entire book. It takes the future out of the hands of some vague force like fate or the market and puts it squarely back in the hands of the individual. His last line is, the essential first step is to think for yourself.
So, as you go about your week, we want to leave you with that one provocative thought. The question we started this whole deep dive with, but flipped around for you personally. Don't just ask, what do people disagree with me on? Ask yourself, are you planning your future or are you just buying lottery tickets?
What is the secret that you know that no one else is even looking for?
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. go find your secret.